All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Judge Task Answer and Explanations of Argumentum Open 2021 by the Arch Course, me and Omar. So, like what you guys already know, that this Judge Task divided into three parts. Multiple choices in the part one, part two is short answer task, and the last and third part is the video assessment um, task. And also, when in explaining the result or the answer of all of those tests, it's going to be divided in uh, two way. I'm going to go first to explain the answer of the section one and two, and after that, it will be continued by Omar to explain the result of the um, judge video assessment. Okay, without any further ado, let's start with the first part, the part one, multiple choices test. First question: which of the following are criteria of legitimate definitional challenge? A. It must be done by the leader of opposition. B. There should be a reasonable grounds of why the definitional challenge is necessary. C. It must be done as a last resort against a poorly defined motions. And D. All of the above. The answer is D. We saw that some of you answers option A, B, or C. All of these options are true and correct, and a legitimate way for you to challenge definitions. Quite easy and quite clear. Second question: if one of the speakers in a team that you think should win a debate made several offensive remarks in their speech, how will it affect your decisions? A. Judge the debate as is and then make a report to the equity team in regards to the equity violation. B. Punish the appropriate speaker by lowering their score, but credit the other speaker for not being offensive by giving them a higher score to justify the win. C. Give them a loss because being offensive has no place in the debate round. And lastly, none of the above is true. The answer is definitely A. You should being objective in assessing the debate based on the team's contribution, their argument, the depth of analysis, the logic that they use for an example, and do not let this kind of incident have clouded your judgment upon them. Probably you also could remind the speaker or the team after they speak about this incident, or you also could put it into in your OA or in general comments if that's necessary for an example. But please do not punish a team by giving them loss, lower their score, or whatever. All right. Question number three: you're judging a debate about something you happen to be an expert in, and one of the speaker brings up an example that you know is untrue, and that example becomes a major backbone of the team's entire case. And how do you weigh the team in the debate? The options are: A, give them the loss because as a judge, you should not tolerate lies. B, punish the lying speaker by giving them a significantly lower score than other speakers. C, judge the debate as is and focus on assessing the quality of the logic. And D, give an additional burden to the opposing teams because they should have been able to detect the lies. A is wrong because you should not directly insert your personal knowledge as an expert within a debate. The judge should be an average, reasonable person. You should enter the debate without any kind of expectation at all, which means you should not punish the speaker because of their lying, for example, in your opinion. And you should also not punish the op by giving them an extra burden. It's going to be very good for the opposite team to notice and point it out, but doesn't necessarily mean that you should give them a higher burden. But you need to assess is that you need to analyze the quality of the logic, because probably the example is not correct, but probably they can explain that phenomena in the comprehensive way, for example, with the structural analysis, for example. I think it's very much fair for you to still credit that argument. So yeah, please be very much aware about these issues. Four, you're a chair judge with two other panels, and it's been 14 minutes and you haven't reached any consensus just yet. what are you going to do? A, ask the OC or or com to give additional time for you because it's a very tight run and the teams deserve to be discussed more. B, call on a vote for immediately. C, use the last 1 minute to persuading your panels with the hopes of them conceding. D, you end the discussion because it's going nowhere and use your decision as final decision because you are the chair. Definitely do not do the D because the panels and the chair have an equal power, except in the case when the number of panels are even, like two, four, six, yeah, continues. The chair have more votes, and the chair is going to have two votes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the chair um, will not listen to the opinion of the panels. Everyone's opinions matter, even for trainee as well. Trainee have a important opinion as well, and it should be listened and it should not be dismissed just because you're a chair. Um, you do not do C because last 1 minute should be used for food. And lastly, do not really ask for the extra time from the Orcom because I mean that you do not want to be the person that delay the entire tournament. Nobody's going to like that. People will not going to like that. So yeah. Question number 5. In giving an OA, what do you think judges should prioritize the most? A, comparing every team with one another and thoroughly assess the points why one team loses or wins over the others instead of only focusing on teams directly ranked above or below them. B, making it as short as possible because more details can be provided during feedback sessions. C, fixating on allocating more time to the first rank team because they should be given more credits for winning the debate. And D, allocating a significant amount of time within the OA to give constructive feedback so teams that do not get first rank can know what to do and argue in order to win the debate. The answer is definitely A. I mean that mm, do not do B because details is very much important within the OA because it ensures that the debaters know that you listen to them. It ensures that you understand what they said within the debate round. And it's also ensure that the debate will not assume that you were being dismissive toward their entire case and argument. And it also could impact your score, feedback score from the debater. So please be aware on that. Um, Moreover, it doesn't necessarily mean because you want to get a good score, you literally put all of the feedbacks within your OE. It's not wise as well because you literally can do feedback outside the OE and outside the debate round. And the feedback score should be purely based on your OA and your comparison between them and how you track the debate. And lastly, just because a certain team got first doesn't necessarily mean that all of the time allocation goes to them, but the time allocation should uh, goes to the most complicated comparison. For example, the debate between those two teams were so close. For example, there were a lot of details that need to be put into consideration. For example, so the more complex the clash between those teams, the more time need to be allocated in term of making a comparison and more time that you need to explain it to the debater. So yeah, that's the right way or the wise way for you to do a time allocation in terms of giving OA. Number 6, which of the following statements is true about POI? A speaker who did not accept or offer POI will receive a score reduction. B, POI serves small function in a debate in a way that they should not affect your decision. C, POIs could be important factors in weighing teams' contribution for engagement standpoints. And D, offering POI is a legitimate strategy to throw your opponent off guard. Definitely, the answer is not D because you should not use POI just for the sake of annoy your opponent. For an example, um, in Argumentum Open, we're going to use the standard that was applied or being applied in Worlds or WUDC about the importance of POI that every debater are encouraged to take at least one POI and also are encouraged to offer POI to other teams because POI can be put into your consideration in weighing a team's contribution, for example, because POI is a legitimate argument or legitimate response, for an example. So, yeah, please keep reminding the debaters to offer and accept POI, of course, in a very moderate manner. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if team do not accept any POI or do not offer any POI, suddenly you will give a score reduction to that certain team or certain speaker. Just probably it can affect the persuasiveness of their case or their argument. Question number 7, is it possible to have the highest scoring speaker from a team that ranks below first, and why? A, no, because the winning team should have the highest scoring speaker and it will be unfair if otherwise. B, yes, because we can have two teams having the same total scores. C, no, because it will only determine detrimental effects on the overall tab. And D, yes, as long as the team that have that speaker that got the highest speaker score has a lower total score than the actual winning team, it's probably, oh no, it's definitely okay. So yeah, please bear in mind, just because I mean that if you think that a speaker from a team gave a very good analysis, but the entirety of identity and team's case was not really backed up by the teammate, for example, or because the one speaker tried to fill the all of the loophole within one speech, it's supposedly being distributed within two speech, for an example. That is the reason why some of the detail lost and also make them lose the round. It's okay for you to appreciate the speaker by give them a highest speaker score within that respective round. But still, if you want to um, if you put them as a losing team, their total team score um, should be lower than the actual team that got first rank or got the higher rank than they. All right. Question number 8. You're a chair judge and you have panel judges who have different ranking than you in a debate that you think is pretty easy and clear to judge. How do you evaluate them? I think this incident happened. The options are A, score them based on the variance. The more the initial rank differs with yours, then they should be scored lower. B, listen to their justification. Then score them based on the reasoning and quality of their participation within the discussion. C, give them a fairly higher score if they decide to follow your initial rank easily and fastly in order to save time um, and save the quality of discussion. D, give them a low score regardless of the justification that they have and they provide because it's already a clear debate anyway and why they able to have the different rank than yours. The answer is definitely B. Like all of you know that debate is an art when there is no definitive correct and definitive wrong. So we should appreciate everyone's opinion and we should appreciate their input or their thought about the debate. So even if you have a different ranking within the debate, everyone should have a right to justify themselves. And from that respective justification, then you can score them. So do not use other metrics to score a panels or a trainee. 9, in a round in which you have an iron speaker, someone who speaks twice for a team, how would you assess the team standing in the debate? A, judge the team and score the speaker as is, and while also marking that is as a duplicate speech in the online ballot. I think that the complete explanation of these issues is already on the technical guide. Hopefully, you guys already read that. B, give them an automatic loss because it is supposed to be a team sport. C, judge a team and score the speaker as is by pretending that the other speaker actually speak uh, and you score both of them separately. And D, score the speaker higher for the extra effort for helping the teammate. The answer is A. For example, that you have two speaker and you think that both speeches are good and you want to give both speech a good score, it's perfectly fine. But yeah, it will not be reflected in the online ballot or Tabicat because the system of Tabicat will directly um, notice the iron person only if you already mark that as a duplicate speech in online ballot. So yeah, I'm not going to talk about technicalities a lot in this. And last but not least, in the first part, which of following things should not be attributed as completely new material in web speeches? A. Analysis from new actors' perspective. B. New principle analysis. C. Additional example and responses. And D. New conclusion, manifestation, and impact. And the answer is C, because the answers or the options A is unfair because new actors can literally change the entire direction of the debate, and it's unfair for it to suddenly come up in the whip speech. B, new principle analysis. Again, new principle also could be manifested into different direction of the debate. Unfair also from the other team because they are unable to respond to that. New conclusion and manifestation and impact also could result to a different outcome, for example, which mean also the different direction of the debate. So what you cannot attribute as a new material is the new additional example and responses, because new example and new rebuttal is important for them to um, strengthen their team. But moreover, even though they bring an impact, for example, as long as the conclusion is still the same with their member, for example, it's still perfectly fine and should not be attributed as a completely new material in web speech. The entire explanation also could be read in the judge briefing. All right, part two, short answer test. Question number one. In a debate with the motion of this House would require companies to have minimum quota of women in their board of directors, the OG defined that minimum quota as having the number as minimum as possible. Instead of challenging the definitions, because minimum quota is not equal with making the number as minimum or as low as possible, but the OO follow the definition, which eventually the closing bench agree with that as well. As a judge that is aware that the definition is incorrect, how would you evaluate and assess the debate? Four-way. First, aware that it was squirrel, because I think that some of you answer this question by saying that open government has substance. We don't necessarily think that it is a substance because it's already literally a different definition, different type of debate. So the first thing you need to do is that recognizing that this is a squirrel definition. But second of all, even though you already understand that it is a squirrel definition, you need to judge the debate as is. Um, that means that you should judge the debate and give the rank or make the decision based on the things, qualities of argument, step-by-step logical analysis, the responses, engagement, and all of the dynamic within the debate. So do not insert your expectation about the right way of the debate. And third, what you can do is that you should clearly address these issues within your OA, whether you want to put it in your general comments or in your comparison, whatever, as long as it should be pointed out or addressed clearly so the debater aware of that mistake and that incident so it could be avoided in the next rounds. But four, just because you judge the debate as is, you also need to recognize that probably the quality of the debate will be lower, because I think that in making a motion, the adjudication court already think a lot about the balance of the motion, for an example, or whether or not the motion have a room of exploration for the closing benches, for example. Creating and squirrel a new definition means that probably the motion could be unbalanced, for example, or probably the motion will be very much neat and it give no room of exploration for the closing bench. That means that probably the engagement or the quality of arguments not going to be developed that much. Hence, it can create the debate to have lower quality compared to other rooms, for example, the debate the motion and the right definitions. Second, you're a chair judge in a debate and you have four wings or panels with you. After the debate finishes, you notice that each judge has radically different rankings. For an example, please walk us through on how you're going to facilitate discussion with allocated time. I think that the first step you could take is that are that first find the common rank first. For an example, in the four wings, which mean there are five judges, maybe four of them already give the clear win or clear first to OG, for example, or the clear fourth to OG, for example, and this other rank like first, second, third uh, are the same, for example, but then there is one panel that suddenly give fourth to opening government regardless other panel gives it first. That's the most distinct one, and that should be discussed first. So you should find the common rank first, and after that you could try start to talk and discuss about other rank. And in the way for you to discuss any other rank, start to question the most distinct rank, so you all guys will be on the same page on the clear win or clear lose uh, teams, for an example. And after you already have that, probably the easiest way you could um, continue the discussion is by decide the top two and the bottom two of the teams, for an example. So you already have a clear comparison. For example, it's a golf bench win or up bench win or opening bench or closing bench or long diagonal or whatever. Uh, why it is important? Because when you already have decide top two or bottom two, for example, then you could um, start to discuss within the top two team who got higher rank or within the bottom two teams who got a higher rank, for example. And it's also make sure the gap of differences within the rank is smaller, and probably that could help you to do vote at the time when you're already running out of time, because vote only allow when it's only one different rank left. It is not off one. I mistype it. So for example, it's only between CG and CO or OG and OO, for example. But when OG, OO, and CO still have different ranking, do not do a vote. I think that those are the easy way for you to uh, walk through the discussion in the debate. Of course, the dynamic of discussion will be different when the dynamic of the debate and the variety of ranks also different could result to different way to approach. But I think it is a general approach that you guys could apply to your um, rule of thumb. And the last questions. Yep. Okay, very, very long question. In a debate with the motion of this House support the widespread implementation of San Pedro prison system, or argued that in principle, the system of prison is unjustified because it allows criminals to live outside the cell and allows them to meet their family, so it gives the criminals the freedom that they do not deserve. On top of that, OU also argued that the system is not suitable because the amount of freedom will make the criminal unable to feel guilty and will not achieve the CGS function of deterrence. Later on, CEO comes in and framed the debate by explaining why the debate is not supposed to talk about whether the San Pedro system is good or bad, but why it should not be implemented in a widespread manner because each country has different demographic and dominant type of crime, and therefore the prison system should adapt to that type of crime that are frequently occurring in that specific country, like for example Mexico and Scandinavian countries that implement different prison systems to adjust to the context of crime. How do you evaluate and compare these different positive contributions? So I think that the A course, me and Omar agree that we're going to put CO over OO, but you need to recognize as well, this is not a definitive truth or not a definitive answer, because there are a lot of dynamics that are going to affect the rank between at the placement between CO and OO. Like for example, their engagement to the government bench, for example, the argument that OG and CJ would like to bring, for example. But yeah, if we just want to judge based on the context that was given in the questions, then we agree that CEO above OO. The reason are as follow. First reason is that I think that we think that CEO answering the burden even better, because I think that their framing was also correct by pointing out that this debate should not talk about whether or not San Pedro prison system is good or bad, but the motion specifically talk about the support of the widespread implementation of San Pedro prison system, which means the burden that need to be answered by teams are also whether or not this San Pedro prison system is possible to be implemented in a widespread manner, for an example. This is also important because it could break the possible deadlock in opening debate or in other benches, for example, because if OO talk about the harms and the shoplifting, the harm of the San Pedro's prison system, there is a possibility that the OG or the CG or the government bench will also shoplift the benefit of San Pedro's system. But the argument of against the widespread implementation and the adaptations of prison system based on the demographic of dominant crimes pass all of this deadlock, because regardless every benefit from opening government, regardless all of the harm from the opening opposition, regardless San Pedro good or bad, even if it is very much good and government bench best case, but it is still not feasible to be applied or implemented widespreadly because of the reason that they talk about in CO case. So it's also engaged to their opponent best case. And I think that it was something that being dismissed by the entire opening opposition. And lastly, the reason why we put CEO over OO, because I think that CEO could have a potential extension on OO principle. Because if OO focus to talk about how it's going to be unfair for the victims, I think that the argument from CEO that talk about how different type of crime is important to be recognized, which means you probably have a different victims, for an example, which means probably their need is different. I don't. I know that they did not point it out explicitly, but probably it could be a small point to see their contribution. But of course, then again, uh, it is just how we see the debate based on the potential argument and the positive argument. And yeah, there's a reason why we give CEO over OO. So I think that that is the last answers in the second part of the judge task. Do understand that on the second part is different from the first part. Uh, we think that there is no a correct or wrong answer. So do not be sad just because you have different answer with the A core, for example. What we value from your answer is your opinion, your step-by-step analysis, the logic that you use, the quality of your justification, for example. And even if you have a different answer than ACORE, as long as you able to justify yourself and your answers in the comprehensive manner as an ACORE, we're still going to credit that answer. So just do not be sad because of that, except the first part, because the answer is definitive. It was a multiple choices questions. So yeah, I think that's the end of the explanation of the judge task on the first and the second part. And the third part of the video assessment is going to be explained by Omar. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.